First on film entertainment, very, very big week, a huge movie. Just trying to think, well, we'd have to go back to Oppenheimer and films like that we have seen, good fortune to have seen at Imax. We're talking about Dune Part Two and Denis Villeneuve. What a masterful filmmaker that man is. With me, Jacqui Hammerton, Peter Krauss, Greg King, and Peter, let's start with you. I remember seeing Incendie and was blown away. That was my film of the year when that came out. Well, that was about 2010 from recollection, and he keeps on doing it, doesn't he?
He's an excellent director. He's Canadian. We should make that very clear. And Denis really fashioned some great screenplays.
What's been your favourite work of his, if you can sort of off the top? Because I still think Incendie was so surprising for me that I couldn't get it out of my head, and that's the sign of a good movie.
It is, and I agree with you. Incendie, that family drama, which became something quite twisting, was such a clever film.
But the fact is that he can go from there to something like Dune and both become plausible. Again, the sign of somebody who's on top of his game. Greg King, are you a big fan too?
Well, I really liked Prisoners, that film with Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman. I thought that was his best film.
Okay. And Jacqui, have you seen much of Denis Villeneuve's work?
I'm just trying to recollect what I have seen, but I think Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 have kind of overtaken everything else he's done just for the moment.
Well, I mean, the immediacy, of course, that's the issue here, and you sort of recollect and you think, oh my golly, that was 10 years ago, that was 14 years ago, whatever it might be. But, okay, let's start with, Greg, you read a lot. Did you read the Frank Herbert novel?
No, science fiction is not one of my preferred genres, so I don't really read much science fiction, and I haven't read Dune or any of its spin-off novels.
Okay, so when you approach a movie, well, initially with Dune in 2021 and now Dune Part 2, do you come with any foreknowledge? In other words, it can be quite a convoluted sort of plot line unless you've got some...
Well, I came with pre-knowledge because I'd seen the David Lynch film from 1984, so I thought what was going to happen.
What about you in terms of that, Jacqui? Are you somebody who'd seen Dune initially, the earlier version, or not?
No, again, like Greg, I mean, even more than Greg, science fiction, like horror, for me, I just don't go looking for these films. I did remember Arrival.
Yes,
is the director's previous work from 2016, which I absolutely loved, and I've probably seen that 3 or 4 times since then, and really, really enjoyed that film. And that is science fiction, but that had a very human link in it. Not so much Dune 1 and 2.
Okay, now Peter, you I mean, a storied history of cinema in your mind. So going into a movie like Dune and go back to 2021, what were your expectations, and did they exceed your expectations once you exited IMAX?
Well, certainly they did exceed my expectations, but like Greg, I'd seen the David Lynch version of Dune. And for me, always, a film has to stand alone. I don't care if it's adapted from a book or whatever. And his first Dune, Denis' first Dune, was very good. And I was hoping that the second one, or the Part 2, would be just as good. And it certainly, as you asked me, exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with that assessment. I came out of this thinking I want to see Part 3 tomorrow. And that's a really good sign, though. Greg, did you? And again, we'll go into the depth of this in the next few minutes. But did you come out of this thinking this is better than Part 1?
Not entirely. No, I thought it took a while to get started. Actually, with so much politics, mysticism, religion at the start, it was a bit slow to get off the ground for me.
Oh, that's interesting. And Jacqui, what about you?
I saw the two of them fairly equal in lack of interest from me and dullness and overluted. And they were about equal for my part. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, let's go into a little bit of detail, because the actual novel upon which this is based, the Frank Herbert novel, came out in 1965. And in this Dune Part Two, in this particular installment of the movie, the exiled Duke of House Atreides, whose name is Paul Atreides, played by Timothy Chalamet, establishes himself as a leader of men. And I'm talking men and women, but the generic men. The freemen who live on the desert planet Arrakis may be skeptical of Paul Atreides rather at first, but Paul puts paid to their misgivings with a series of acts of bravery because he's put through a number of trials. And in his corner is a tribal head of the freemen, a guy called Stilgar, played by Javier Bardem. He believes in a particular prophecy of a mother and son bringing prosperity to Arrakis. And to that end, he helps elevate Atreides' mother, Jessica, that's the role filled by Rebecca Ferguson, to Reverend Mother. And in so doing, she inherits the memories of her female ancestors. Then you've got a young and feisty freeman warrior called Chani, played by Zendaya, who develops respect for Atreides and becomes his lover. But dark forces continue to gather, and the war against House Harkonnen escalates. So the evil architect is the ruthless Baron Vladimir Harkonnen's nephew, Rabban, played by Dave Bautista. His grip, though, on valuable spice production is loosening. And then stepping up is Baron's other nephew, Fade Routher, played by Austin Butler. You cannot, I defy anyone to recognise Austin Butler with all the makeup, mind you. I found this quite remarkable as a movie. I thought it not only developed the narrative, but it excels in the special effects department. And the filmmakers have pulled out all stops and how. The desert scenes, coupled with the costuming, the incredible sound that you get at Imax, nothing short of spectacular. And I found the impact was immediate and ultra-consistent. So the director, the co-writer, Denis Villeneuve's mastery of his craft, I found magnificent to watch. The big names in the cast, they're all up for the action and the subterfuge in the plotting. I really believe that Chalamet is an actor of a generation. He makes for a compelling lead. Zendaya stands toe-to-toe with him as Chani, and I'm a really big rap for Rebecca Ferguson as the Oracle Jessica. Javier Bardem, well, he's got a key role as Stilgar, and there's no questioning Josh Brolin's loyalty as Gurney Halleck. I mentioned Austin Butler, incredibly menacing as Fade Routher, but unrecognisable. And Florence Pugh, quite dignified as Princess Arulan. Also, I want to mention Charlotte Rampling brings appropriate arrogance and entitlement to Reverend Mother Mahayam. And I do recall saying this after the first instalment, but I think it's worth repeating now. If you're lucky enough to have the chance to see Dune Part 2 in IMAX or at IMAX, please do. It's genuinely an immersive experience. Best way to see the film, without any question. Regardless, though, please view it on the biggest screen possible with the greatest sound quality. And as I said, I reckon Part 2's even better than the original. I wish I could see the next one as soon as I possibly can, but obviously we're going to have to wait a few years before that comes on board. So it's a fabulous movie. I would urge you to see it. And whether or not you like science fiction, this is masterful filmmaking. Is it not, Peter?
Definitely agree with you. It is masterful filmmaking. It's so interesting to see it at IMAX because I was watching carefully as the screen expanded and contracted many, many times during the screening from the full IMAX to the standard 70mm IMAX. And that means that you get these massive vistas and massive scenes from time to time. And sometimes they're very short, and at other times you get the more personal sort of dramas that come in. Look, this is a film, basically, if you boil it down, about warring factions, about control, about power. And it's also about women and their impact on the situation that the men seem to face, in particular, as the film develops. So what Villeneuve has done is created an excellent family drama, which in some respects is not necessarily too different from Encendies, which I found so interesting. And what he's done with this continuation of Dune is to really pack in lots more special effects, the sandworms, which are incredible, and spectacle into what boils down to something that is about family control, and as we see near the end of the film, about power and how that power can corrupt or not corrupt, as the case might be. So certainly I'm looking forward to the next installment, if they can afford to make one. But I was very impressed by Dune Part Two.
I heard from somebody, Peter, that the third part has already been made, but I'm not sure that's true or not, or whether that was just hearsay. So, because I mean, one of the things that I'm always conscious of when a new movie comes out is, has time gone by? Because an actor becomes older, right? And if you're meant to pick up the threads immediately after the first installment, which Dune 2 does, if they make it 6 or 7 years later, even with the best of makeup, that may end up showing on the big screen. So I'm not sure whether that's just hearsay. Have any of the others amongst you heard that the third part has already been made?
No, I haven't heard that. But if it's set in the year 10,000 or so, does it matter?
Yes. What's the 1,000 years between drinks? Yes, fair enough. Okay, so Greg King, your views of Dune Part 2?
Oh, well, I agree with some of what you said there. Special effects are fantastic there. The epic scope, brilliant. The sound design is also quite overwhelming there. And there's a sequence in the middle of the film when he shoots in black and white, a sort of gladiatorial contest in the middle of this arena there, with all the crowd up and there. It sort of was reminiscent of some of the Nuremberg stuff from the Nazis, 70 years ago or something. But it's a very action-packed film, especially in the second half of the film. I agree that Timothy Chalamet is a very strong lead. He's got those piercing blue eyes that come across on the screen as well. Austin Butler, yeah, he was great and menacing in his role there as a bit of a villain there. A great cast in the film. But I just had a bit of trouble with the start of the film when it was a little bit slow in developing this landscape, this world there, with all the mysticism, religion, politics playing out there. It didn't quite grab me as I expected Part 2 to do so. And it took a while to warm up to the fact, where the story actually kicked in there. Great special effects, especially with the sandworms. And some of the action scenes were quite spectacular, and the sound design quite overwhelming as well. So look, it's a good film. For me, on a par with Part 1. Didn't quite top it for me.
Well, it's 2 hours, 46 minutes, Greg. So do you think it felt stretched?
I think it was a little bit long, yes.
Okay. Jacqui, you obviously are not a fan. So where do you sort of see Dune in the pantheon of movies that you've seen?
Well, look, I'm going to agree with actually most of what Greg said just then. Regarding the cast and the special effects, the cinematography, the most of the CGI, I mean, just mind-blowing, really. And agree with you also that if you're seeing it on the Imax screen, I mean, that's going to just double the hit that you get from it. The cast is great, big names, and also they do really well. And yes, their faces, especially, as you say, Chalamet and Zendaya and Austin Butler, I didn't even know it was him until I was looking forward to seeing him in this film, and I didn't know it was him for the whole film. However, what lost it for me was the storyline. I was just not drawn into the lives of these people. As I say, I don't like sci-fi anyway, and for me to like a sci-fi film, I'd still have to have a connection with the cinema, something relatable about it. And I just didn't relate to these people at all. What they were going through, the war scenes, after you've seen it for a few minutes, there was just too much of that for my mind. And in 2 hours 46, I suppose you have to fill it with something. The sound was huge. I mean, we were shaking.
Shaking, yes. It was almost like what's that version where you have moving seats in,
it's around. For earthquake.
Yes.
But, once you've had one war scene, blowing up and explosions and shaking chairs and the big sound and all that, I mean, once you've done it once, you don't need to, I mean, there was too much of that for me. It needed to move on.
Did you like the riding of the sandworms, or did you not like that?
Look, we knew about the sandworms already.
Yes.
I've got this logic thing going on where if you're riding a sandworm because you want to get from A to B, how do you tell the sand? I mean, you can't steer it with one of those little pieces of rope. How do you tell it the direction you're going? Hello?
Yes. Well,
you're just going where the sandworm wants to go. And I mean, you're about the size of a pimple on a pumpkin. So it didn't work for me at all. I like the challenge where Timothy Chalamet had to prove himself by controlling the sandworm. But after that, I'm thinking, well, if you're going to hop on a tram, you know where you're going. If you're riding a sandworm.
I suppose that what I was thinking is, well, he's pointed.
Or did I miss something?
Well, no, you're pointed in the right direction, aren't you? You're not going backwards, right? So it's kind of like riding a bucking.
Yes, but you're riding it, but you're not controlling it. You're not controlling what direction it's going. Peter, do you know? Do you have some knowledge here?
I'm not up on my reading with sandworms, but I must do so.
That's shameful, Peter. That is absolutely disgraceful, right? I mean, you come to a program like this totally unprepared. No.
Well, Peter's in one yet. I haven't read up on my sandworms literature either.
Gregory, right, go to the back of the class, right? And you're back to the wall, right? Or no, the other way around.
I suppose it's unfair to bring, a logical thinking mind to a film like this.
Yeah.
You have to go along with it. You have to believe, but maybe that's why sci-fi isn't my favorite, far from my favorite genre, because I need more.
I think
I need to be able to relate to it.
Jacqui, I think you need to see lots more documentaries, right? That's yeah. All right. So look, let's
like a good doco.
Let's start with you because you'll be lowballing this. So I want to know what your lowball score is for Dune Part 2, which is in cinemas now, M-rated 166 minutes.
Okay, I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
Greg King.
7 to 7.5.
8 for me. Peter?
I just want to mention also in the cast, Léa Seydoux and Stellan Skarsgård. It is a terrific cast, and the music by Hans Zimmer, as always, adds to the film. I give the film 8 out of 10.
There you go. So we are at 1, Peter. Oh, my golly. There's something deeply distressing about that for me.
There must be something in the sandworms.
It might be, yes. So, folks, what I would say is if you are not familiar with Part 1, you've got to familiarise yourself with Part 1 before seeing Part 2.
Well, there are some cinemas around town this weekend that are playing both back to back.
Yes, which I think is a really good idea. It's kind of like...
And with hot weather, it's probably a good idea to spend 5.5 hours in the cinema.
But there's not hot weather this weekend.
It's supposed to be.
During the week, it's getting hot, I think.
Yeah. But having said that, it's kind of like seeing Harry Potter, right? Seeing the 2 parts, one after another, etc. So, yeah, I think it's a very good idea. Okay, we are on...
Now, there's a good idea for a film, Harry Potter and the Sandworms.
Yes. Let's move on JR 88 FM to a phenomenal title for a movie. Now, let's be honest. When you're going to name something, it's kind of like, what was that? Was it a movie about Volvos? They're boxy, but they're good. This is called Humanistic Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person, right? So it's saying as it is. Now, okay, when you see something like that, do you want to go along and see it, or does it make you rush in the other direction? What do you reckon, Jacqui? Just the title.
As soon as it's got the word vampire in it, I'm not interested. Okay. Vampires and zombies are not my territory, just like sci-fi. However, I like quirky titles.
You do.
But I think this title gives away too much of the story.
Ah, okay. Well, seeing you don't like vampires or zombies, just for you, I'm going to Sydney shortly, and I'm going to see Zombie the Musical. Okay, and I'll bring.
When's that on?
Pardon me.
When's that on?
It's on this month.
Yeah.
So I'm going to. Well, okay. So I'm going.
I think the only zombie film I've liked is that Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Was that Pride and Prejudice and Zombies?
Yes.
Yes, it was.
I liked that. That was fun. But that's the only one I've really liked.
What about the one with Nicholas Hoult, Warm?
Yeah, but that's vampires.
Yeah, but hang on.
Is he a zombie or a vampire?
No, he's a zombie.
Oh, was he? Oh, I love
Yeah,
warm bodies.
it's swimming and enjoying it with zombies, basically.
Yeah. I thought it was a great film.
Oh, okay, they were too. Okay, like that is my favourite zombie film then. So that's two decent zombie films out of the whole genre, and we'll talk about this one.
Humanistic Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. Greg, I'm going up to Sydney for the opening of West Side Story on Sydney Harbour. That is annually, as you know, there is a particular show on Sydney Harbour that's called Handa Opera, Handa, and this year it's West Side Story, which I've had the good fortune to see many times, but never on Sydney Harbour.
What date is that?
Do you need to know this now? Okay, it starts in late March. Why is the date important?
I was thinking of going up to Sydney that weekend where there's no football in Melbourne.
Okay, well,
all the time.
Okay, well, all right. So then let me put 21st of.
Hang on.
Pardon me. Just asking me to hang on. I'm hanging on. So thank you. This is like a personal phone call here.
It is, isn't it?
It is a bit like that. Okay, so
we're all eavesdropping.
Thank you. Yes, you're allowed to eavesdrop. Peter, jump in anytime. The situation is that the official opening of the Handa Opera is the 22nd of the month, 22nd of March.
Okay.
I'm seeing there are some shows that are not going to come to Melbourne, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm seeing all of them. So apart from this is for anybody who's interested in doing this, please go ahead and do it because I think they're all going to be fantastic. National Theatre Live is brilliant. Whenever you see it, National Theatre in the UK, it's the bee's knees. And I've had the good fortune to be there, see 3 shows when I was in London many years ago now. Thought it was great. They have got a new show which is at, I think it's called Theatre Royal in Sydney. It is called Theatre Royal, if I'm not mistaken. I'm doing this off the top, so pardon me if I screw anything up, but I don't believe I am. They have got a new show called the Lehman Trilogy, Lehman Trilogy, which is supposed to be outstanding. So,
Alex, that was on National Theatre Live on screen a few years ago from the English performance. So I've seen the Lehman Trilogy.
Oh, and was it as outstanding as? Don't tell me anything about it, but was it as outstanding as I am imagining it is?
It is very impressive. Yes.
Okay, so that's come to Sydney, Greg. So you should try and see that. It's a long show. I think it's about 3 hours 20 minutes, including more than. I think there might be more than one interval, but anyway. So that's the second thing I'm seeing. The third thing I'm seeing is this musical. It's the only musical that we haven't seen that's in Sydney at the moment, which is just starting in the next few days, which is Zombie the Musical. And then, you know how David Williamson as a playwright has been prolific. And for many, many decades, whenever there was a new David Williamson play, especially MTC or whatever, people rushed to go and see it. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's not a young man anymore. He's come out of, I don't know whether you call it semi-retirement or whatever, to write a new piece with Georgie Parker in the lead role, no less. And I'm seeing that play as well. So 4 days I'm going up there for 4 plays/musicals, and I'm going to see Essendon play Sydney at the SCG, or Sydney play Essendon at the SCG. So that's my 4 days with my wife in Sydney. So I reckon you should join me, Greg. Not join us, but you should go up there. Yeah, absolutely. Are you saying hello? There's silence.
No, I said, yeah, fair enough, but I can't go until after school holiday time.
Right, and I'm not sure when the school holiday time is, but
They start at Easter.
Yes, end of March.
End of March. Okay. So if you can get, I mean, I'll talk to you off record, shall we say, or off this particular podcast.
Like three more people later.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. All right. So
and Alex
David Williamson is 82 years old.
There you go. I mean, and that's why I think it's phenomenal bookings for this show. I've got to tell you, Jacqui. Like, I found it very hard to get one seat. I got two in the end, but very, very difficult. So, yeah, and I mean, I think Georgie Parker being in a lead role certainly would help that. And this is one of the frustrations that I have, guys, and I use the term guys generically, is there is so much good stuff happening in both cities. And at times they don't transpose. We don't get to see what Sydney does. So you either sort of pay for an airfare and get up there and pay for accommodation, which is not cheap, I might say. We're staying in the heart of Sydney. So, you either do that or you miss out. And I often have FOMO, right? So I want to go along and see these things. And I usually connect when you have the good fortune of being invited by Opera Australia to see one of their productions. And that's kind of why I'm doing it at this time of the year. And usually Handa Opera takes place in March. So that's something to bear in mind. So let's talk now about Humanistic Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person, which is rated M and goes for 91 minutes. Now, this is a vampire movie that is sensitive and darkly comedic. And we've already referenced sort of movies of this ilk that are like that. That's when that's very much what you get with this film. You've got Sasha, played by Sarah Montpetit, different from other vampires in her family, and I would say from bloodsuckers in general, as we've come to know them. She resiles at horror. Her fangs haven't come through, and she relies upon what are called baggies. So she sucks on blood bags taken from kills made by her mother, played by Sophie Cadeau, and her father, Steve Lanty, right? So they're kills that these two have made. Her dad is more understanding about Sasha's failure to step up than is her mum, and her mum's really at wit's end. Eventually, they farm her out to her cousin, Denise, played by Naomi O'Farrell, who maintains that she'll knock Sasha into shape, and she isn't into giving Sasha any free blood like her parents do. And she's in no doubt that she will teach her how to stand on her own feet. Sasha then chances upon a nice guy called Paul, Felix Antoine Bernard. He is a senior at high school, and he works at a bowling alley, and he's constantly bullied. For as long as he's known it, Paul has been suicidal. He wants to die. Sasha watches him try to take his own life and fail. The pair connects. But Sasha can't bring herself to put the bite on him, even though he knows she's a vampire, and he wants her to. Now, there is a lot to like about the unusual treatment given to a subject that's been around for as long as cinema. And, I think back as far as Nosferatu, being the 1922 German silent horror movie, an adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. This one has been co-written with Christine Doyon and directed by Ariane Louis Cise. And this is not like Bram Stoker's Dracula or Nosferatu. It was born out of Louise Caesar's, desire, shall we say it, to tame her anxieties about death. And she's imposed a very human and respectful element into the movie, which also serves as a coming-of-age story. Yes, Sasha is acting against type, but how does she fit into her own skin without selling out? I really like the quiet confidence that Sarah Montpetit injected into her role. She comes across as a person wrestling with the guilt of knowing what she must do to stay alive, at least as a vampire, but not wanting to hurt others. And there's also a Romeo and Juliet element to this script as she meets and is attracted to Paul, who clearly has a death wish. And like Montpetit, there's a restraint about Felix Antoine Bernard, which suits Paul perfectly, and he comes across as this decent guy who simply doesn't fit into this world. By contrast, Naomi O'Farrell makes it clear in her performance that Denise is driven by her bloodlust. And you've got Sasha's aunt, Marie Brassard, she's nothing if not a pragmatist in this movie. And also appreciated the yin and yang of Sasha's parents, who continually argue about how best to handle their recalcitrant but respectful daughter. So, humanistic vampire seeking consenting suicidal person has impact from the get-go when Sasha's having what appears to be an ordinary birthday celebration. That is, until it turns out to be anything but ordinary when the invited clown decides to try some magic. And talking of magic, there's something special about this movie, which I found had a tonal resonance that makes it eminently relatable. I found myself genuinely caring about Sasha and Paul. So I went on the journey with them, wondered how they'd find a way out of the conundrum they faced. And this is more fantasy than gore. I mean, yeah, there are some scenes, but humanistic vampire seeking consenting suicidal person struck a chord with me, and I reckon it's got some spellbinding elements. So I enjoyed it. What about you, Jacqui?
I agree with you, Alex. I went along with it. I liked these characters. We really felt for them. We were with them. And I think some of that was probably because it didn't go on the gory side of vampires too heavily. We saw blood, not a lot of it. And like some vampire films I've seen where, it's a gore fest. So we actually, it had a little more relatable to real life because of that. I liked the characters. I found the film surprising and delighting, and I couldn't even guess where it was going from halfway through. I didn't know how it was going to end. It's more teen romance, coming of age story than it is. The vampire thing is just a vehicle for that. I think the two main characters are just totally cute as buttons. As you said, the secondary characters, the parents, it's just real life, and they're very amusing, and I liked a lot of the humour in it. Her cousin Denise, she's got some blood around her face. They hop in the car and she gets the wet wipes out to tidy her up. I mean, little contemporary touches like that. I also liked very much Denise's lodgings where Sasha goes to live, this sort of, trendy warehouse sort of setup. There are some rather gory hooks in the corner over the chopping bench. But apart from that, it's a really moody blue-grey kind of, trendy setup to live. And I think it just all adds to the mood of the whole film.
It's
my only problem was some of the moral issues going on here. Like, really, Paul's tendency to depression, although he said that he'd been depressed since he was born because he was born with an umbilical cord around his neck, which is a rather horrible sort of vision. But, the cause of his depression, all that we saw, was the bullying. And, there's no attempt to get around the bullying issue, and I don't think it's a good enough reason to do a suicide.
They do address the bullying, the guy who's doing most of the bullying within the movie.
Yes, but not probably in the way that we would here today.
Yes. But I mean, it's isn't it what I loved about humanistic vampire seeking consenting suicidal person is it's really, you don't know if you know nothing about it, you go in there and you think, oh my God, this is a nice little film, really unexpected. It's an unexpected pleasure, isn't it, Jacqui?
It's very sweet. It is really very sweet.
So we've now got a third movie in this genre that you're becoming an aficionado, Jacqueline.
Well, 3 out of how many films? Look, Peter would know how many vampire and zombie films there have been.
Hang on. Why would Peter know? He knows nothing about sandworms, so why would he know about this?
All right, let's go to Greg then. Greg should know.
Well, don't forget zombie movies. You go back to George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead and all those kind of films. So,
well, I don't, Greg.
Then the TV series The Walking Dead, of course.
There you go.
No, not for me.
Not for you. Fair enough. Well, this is better than Twilight, isn't it, Jacqui?
Oh, funnily enough,
you like Twilight? Okay.
Oh, sort of. But this is much sweeter.
No, hang on. Hang on. How many Twilight movies were there? So, Jacqui, you're up to like 4 or 5 or 6 movies of the.
Oh, no, there was a lot about Twilight that I didn't like, and I certainly didn't didn't, relate to the characters in a way that this is. I mean, their deadpan faces, deadpan, haha.
Ah, yes, very good. Okay, so it's great. I'm really pleased you enjoyed it. And what about you, Greg? Did you sort of get the bite? Should I bite my tongue or yours?
Whatever. Look, as you said, it's a great title there. And I like the romance that developed between Sasha, the sensitive vampire, and Paul, the introverted teenager, with suicidal thoughts after being bullied. The unlikely relationship that develops between them is the focus of the film there. This is a fresh take on the concept of vampires living amongst us, but I also thought it had a few thematic connections to films like Let the Right One In and Once Bitten. But the dark, moody lighting, the way it's been shot by cinematographer Sean Pavlis, and that is quite intriguing. But it's a black comedy / coming-of-age story there about this reluctant vampire and an introverted teen there. And it doesn't quite play out the way you think it's going to be, but it's got a nice, sweet ending.
Yeah, but that surprise element is a beautiful thing, is it not, Peter?
It is, to some extent, yes, I agree. I had a few misgivings about this whole notion of suicide and how it's portrayed in the film, but that's from a mental health perspective. But leaving that to one side, there's a few perspectives I want to mention. First of all, we've spoken about Denis Villeneuve, Canadian, and this film, Humanistic Vampire, Canadian. So there's an interesting theme today in discussing these two films. Secondly, there have been so many vampire films. I mean, Dracula, etc., has featured in, I would say, hundreds of films. I mean, look at the Hammer House of Horror in the 60s. Look at Nosferatu, as you've mentioned, and the 1931 Dracula, etc. There's been so many versions. And looking at how vampires can relate to sentient beings, if you like to put it that way, in the world. And we've got, for example, a gross example that's on Netflix at the moment, which is Oscar nominated, and that's El Conde. And then we've got the more benign sort of elements of vampirism, which we see in Let the Right One In, of course, Twilight, and other films of that nature. Now, this one, I think, works quite well because it is a romance, sort of a romance dressed up as a vampire movie with potential for alternative endings, which I won't talk about. And that's what I liked about the film. It did explore some of those aspects quite well. Look, the whole issue of vampires in society is one that deserves a documentary in itself. And this film would be an interesting addition to that.
Sorry, when you say vampires in society, you're not actually saying that vampires exist, are you?
No, I'm talking about in society as films depict them.
Thank you.
Thank heavens for that.
Yes, although I must say the vampires that meet sandworms, now that is a film to watch.
Oh, my golly. Vampire meets sandworm.
With Harry Potter on the side. Anyway.
Peter, that could become a cult classic like The Room. That's phenomenal, Peter. All right, let's start with you. I want a score out of 10 for Humanistic Vampire, Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person, rated M, 91 minutes. Peter?
Yes, I like the film, 7 out of 10.
Gregory King?
7 out of 10.
Jacqui Hammerton?
I just edged up a little bit on 7.5. I really enjoyed this film.
And I'm doing this deliberately knowing what the scores are going to be. No, I don't, but I'm just presuming, and I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was such a surprise and so delightful as a surprise. Now, we are on JAIR 88 FM. If you want to become a member, please do. $54 for the year. Just go to j-air.com.au. We'd love to have you on board. And as a community station, we rely upon people like you being generous as benefactors, if you like, to keep the station running. So 24 hours a day, there's music, there's entertainment, there's views, there's news, there's all sorts of other bits and pieces. So tune in and keep tuning in as you are right now. I want to go to a few, I've seen some pretty amazing things. Now, okay, Jacqui, do you like slapstick or not?
Oh, done well, it's fine.
Well, no, I mean, when you say it's fine.
The first thing that comes to mind is the Three Stooges.
Yes, it's funny. That's the first thing I think of. Greg, do you agree with it? When you think slapsticks, that's the first thing. Because, I mean, we're of a certain age, and that's how we...
Mr. Bean.
Yeah, okay. What about you, Peter, who you never see anything other than when you were forced to at gunpoint? Is that right? In the theatre? Sorry, there was one exception. There was one exception where you received an invitation, you felt you couldn't turn the person down. I remember that recently. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah, but apart from that,
yes.
you have to be taken in a little white coat with your hand tied behind your back before you go enter a theatre, correct?
Oh, a theatre. So I thought with slapstick you were referring to cinema as well, and of course Lauren Hardy and Jerry Lewis, etc. But yes, I'm not a theatre person.
No. But okay. So going on to the slapstick bent, do you actually? I've never asked you this, Peter. Do you have a favourite genre or not?
I like all genres, but I must say a good solid drama is one that I prefer.
While we're talking about it, I'd say, as far as I'm concerned, I like thrillers. That's my number one. What about you, Greg? What would, if you had to pick one? I know it's like picking between children, but I'm asking you to do that, Jacqui, in a moment.
Yeah, I like thrillers, action movies.
Okay, thrillers. Okay, so we've got drama, thriller. Jacqui?
My favourite would be unpredictable, quirky films.
Ah.
So that covers kind of anything from foreign language often to, well, it can be a thriller if there are enough twists.
Yes.
But not sci-fi, not horror, and not usually vampires and zombies and weird beasts.
Right. So, okay. The reason I'm mentioning all of this is 2 nights ago, I went to see the opening of Ruthless, the musical. Now, I'm not sure whether you're going to see that one, Greg, or not, but it's put on by Stage Bugs Production at a theatre that bears my name, but it's not my theatre. It's called Alex Theatre in St Kilda. So I'm going to pose this to each of you. If you were to say, I'm going to use the word talent. Now, okay, is talent something that is, like, I can look at something and say, isn't that wonderful? Aren't they talented? And you, Greg, could look at the same person and say, golly, they're over the top, etc., etc. So surely talent's in the eye of the beholder. It's not something that, or is it universal? What's your view, Greg, on that subject?
Everyone has a different opinion, I'd imagine, on what talent is, yeah.
Well, I mean, is there something, if there's one human being, like, I mean, Albert Einstein, I would have thought that he would be regarded as incredibly talented by everyone. Or am I wrong, Jacqui?
Oh, gee, jumping from slapstick to Einstein, my brain is
because it's
rolling up.
It's one.
Well, I would say talent and skill have are more objective to be assessed than something, for example, such as humour, which is a very subjective thing. So, I might say someone is a very talented comedian, but if you don't like that style of humour, you wouldn't agree. Whereas if you saw, some gymnastics, Olympic gymnastics, you could barely dispute if someone does a great routine that they're in fact talented.
No, it's a very, very good way of putting it. Peter, do you want to jump in here, or what's your view of talent?
Well, talent is very subjective, and of course it's whether you're born with an ability that can be developed, or whether you develop that ability without having been born with that. I mean, there are so many different perspectives on talent. It needs to be fleshed out a lot more.
Well, okay, so with Ruthless, the musical, and it's Ruthless with an exclamation mark, talent, who has it and who doesn't? And I would say it's a word readily bandied about, but it's fair to say that talent gets down to the eye and, obviously, with a musical, the ear of the beholder. So that's the subject of this absurdist slapstick musical. That's the reason I'm using it in the same breath, Jacqui. It was first performed off-Broadway in 1992, so I'm not aware that it's been here before. It may have been, but if it has, I hadn't seen it. It's a rollicking spoof of classic shows like Gypsy and Mame, and also, I don't know whether you saw this as a movie. I suppose this would be either you, Greg, or Peter. Did you see The Bad Seed, the movie?
Oh, yes, from the 50s.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So it's a spoof of that kind of genre. So you've got the central player is an 8-year-old called Tina Denmark, played by an adult, Louisa Oro, and she longs to be a star, and she'll stop at nothing to get there. And she has more talent in her little finger than her adopted housewife mother, Judy, played by Brittany Leslie, who flits about alone without her frequently absent husband. And an oft-used gag in Ruthless the musical is that we hear his name enough but never get to see him. Into their lives steps a larger-than-life talent agent called Sylvia St. Croix, played by Dolly Diamond. And Sylvia St. Croix saw Tina perform at a senior's home and was immediately enamoured. So St. Croix convinces the mother, Judy Denmark, to allow her daughter to leave school to pursue fame and fortune. Now, okay, we have to suspend belief here, Jacqui, because she's 8 years of age, right? And you imagine a talent agent saying to the parent, well, she shouldn't go to school anymore. She should just, seek Broadway fame. Wouldn't happen. But there you go. We suspend belief. So only before this can happen, because the mother does agree, Tina desperately wants the lead role as Pippi Longstocking in the school musical, right? So you get the sense of the absurd in terms of what I'm talking about. And this school musical is being orchestrated by the teacher known as Miss Thorne, played by Stephanie Astrid John. Now, Gregory King, as a teacher, have you ever in your life been involved in a school musical?
No.
Would you like to be?
Not particularly.
But you're into theatre, you could play an important part here. You could be the dramaturge. You could be, you could get involved if you wanted to. I'm just putting it out there. And Peter, you who counsel sort of school-type students, I mean, would you like to get involved, knowing nothing whatsoever about theatre? Sorry, I just slipped.
Absolutely not. That would be my worst nightmare.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, among those Tina's up against is 10-year-old Louise Lerman, played by Olivia Sharalambu. And she is the entitled, disinterested, and talentless daughter of uber-wealthy parents. So surprise, surprise, not, Tina lucks out and is enraged. So Louise Lerman gets the role. This is when the talent agent Sylvia St. Croix suggests that Tina become the understudy, ready to step in at a moment's notice if Lerman is unavailable to take the stage for the show's one performance, right? So you got an understudy for a performance that will only be performed once, right? There we go. And with a devilish smile, Tina accepts. Treachery is afoot. And the musical Ruthless takes off from there, with revelation after revelation following. And that includes seeing the mother, Judy Denmark, well and truly shrug off the talentless housewife tag, as well as shocking family secrets being revealed. The music's by Marvin Laird, lyrics and book by Joel Paley. Everything in the clearly outrageous production played strictly for laughs is camped up. So with affectations at the ready, the cast go for the Doctor. Why wouldn't they? After all, Over the Top is the name of the game, and that includes ear-piercing solos. And, some of the voices are very good, but I tell you what, I had to actually put my hand over my ear. I thought my eardrums were going to burst at certain times here. But, that's the whole point. So you might want to consider taking, what do you call them? The things you stick in your ear? Earplugs, right? The frivolity is infectious. The one-liners come thick and fast. As Sylvia St. Croix, Dolly Diamond is totally at home. She owns the stage. She pouts, she pontificates. Brittany Leslie milks Judy Denmark's naivete and more, while Louisa Oro's facial expressions underpin Tina's two-faced persona. And I was particularly taken by the performance and also the singing, the vocal proclivity of Stephanie Astrid John as the teacher and wannabe actor. Olivia Sharalambu is a hoot as a precocious youngster, and she also plays the scheming maid to a Tony Award-winning star. Emma Claire Waxman shines as Tina's grandmother, who is open to more than a tipple, shall we say. Damien Jones, well, he's done a really fine job with the set designs. homely setting giving way to Broadway glamour after interval. Frocked and Flouncy described some of the costuming by, again, Brittany Leslie. So this is heaps of fun. It's wild, it's wacky, but at 2.5 hours, including interval, it feels stretched to me, particularly in the first act. Having said that, I revelled in the amped-up skullduggery in Act 2. Thought that worked very, very well. It's directed by Chelsea Matheson, musical direction from Dave Barclay and Ned Dixon, playing at Alex Theatre in St Kilda until the 24th of March. It's called Ruthless the Musical, but put on by Stagebugs Productions, plural. One thing that I should mention at this point is that Alex Theatre is a great venue. It is easy to park around because they're metered parking, except when the Grand Prix is on. But, you know, it's really easy to get around. And it's really growing as a venue. I've looked at what's coming up, and I know they were struggling to get shows. They're at the stage now, they're putting on a lot of different shows, and a lot of the shows are increasing in terms of, if you like, their professionalism. And I like that. I think it's going on a really good trajectory, and I would urge people to support what is good local theatre. Look, I'd call this a semi-professional show. It is a professional show, but, it's not something that I'd like to see this done by the creme de la creme of actors put on at maybe the comedy theatre. I'd like to see whether it would could hold its own in that sort of venue. I think it could. And bear in mind, this was an off-Broadway show. So, Jacqui, like the Humanistic Vampire seeking suicidal person, it is it's that kind of production. Do you think that this would appeal to you or not, Jacqui?
Jackie's left us.
Oh, she's left us. Well, then that's no good. She's got out of. What about you, Greg? Given what we've talked about, do you think this would appeal to you?
Probably not.
Oh, okay. Well, only because of the comparisons to a movie that you quite liked. Peter, I'm not even going to ask you, not even going to bother. If it was a movie, you'd see it though, wouldn't you, eh?
Oh, if it was a movie, perhaps, but it doesn't sound overly appealing. I think I prefer to see The Bad Seed from 1956.
Oh, there you go. Yes, very good. Okay, so that's it on now. Ruthless the Musical at Alex Theatre. A couple of other things, and where we won't have time to sort of go into the fine detail, but I think it is certainly worth mentioning a couple of shows that are on at the moment. There is Dry Land. Now, this has got a very, very incendiary title. It's called The Explosives Factory. It's part of Theatre Works, and I presume it used to be an explosives factory, hence the name. I'll have to research that. But have you been there, Greg, or not?
No.
Okay. It's up.
I'm sure you're job with a bang.
Yeah, thank you. It's upstairs. It's sort of this hole in the wall, and you walk up these very, very steep set of stairs, very narrow, steep set of stairs, and you got this theatre. Wonderful. Anyway, Dry Land. It's put on by Flat Pack, and it's got a lot to say about abortion, female friendships, and being a teenager. But it does take a long time to say it, and it's the brainchild of an American playwright called Ruby Ray Spiegel. And back in 2014, Dry Land, which was her first full-length play, premiered again off-Broadway. Spiegel was 21 years old and still a playwriting student at Yale University at that time. Isn't that a remarkable achievement, right? You're studying and you've suddenly got a play premiering off-Broadway that I think initially went for over a year. I mean, that's pretty amazing, isn't it, Greg, eh? Something like that. So this is on at Theatre Works at the Explosives Factory, and it's 90 minutes without interval. And look, I liked it. I thought, again, it could have been done in closer to 65 minutes maybe, or 70 minutes. I thought I found the first 45 minutes dragged. But other than that, I found there's a really interesting dynamic between a couple of friends here, and it's worth considering. Dry Land at Theatre Works Explosives Factory. So I should say that is on until the 9th of March. And the other thing that I wanted to mention before we left for the day is a really good production, outstanding production called The Hate Race at Malthouse Theatre. And racism comes in many forms and from many quarters. It can strike, well, with the speed of a bullet train. That's the subject explored in a dramatic but also a very humorous way through a series of anecdotes from the coloured English daughter of West Indian parents. And it's the play's writer is Maxine Beneba Clark, originally wrote the piece as a memoir, which became a bestseller, and thereafter she adapted it for the stage. So this is very much her story, and it's told through remarkable acting from Zara Newman, who I raved about in an MTC production. She just assumes the character of Maxine, the playwright, and others of significance in Maxine's life. And it starts with her first day of preschool, and it basically goes through until she's a young mother. It's amazing. And it's also got a musical element, and the musician in this is absolutely brilliant. A smooth voice, velvety. Her name is Kuda Mapisa, and I yearn to hear more of her. It's brilliant production. It really is. This one is excellent. 65 minutes without interval, playing at Beckett Theatre, at Malthouse Theatre until the 17th of March. And the other one I will be talking about next week, also on at the Malthouse Theatre, is Yentl, which I saw last year at, I think it was Fairfax Studio at Arts Centre Melbourne. So they've brought it back, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that one, and I will talk about it with you next week. That is it, folks. First on Film and Entertainment. Over and out.